Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. And George,
G'day, mate.
sir, how are you?
I'm good. What's has happened since last saw you? Some lady in the UK died.
Oh, yeah. Every time without being any disrespectful at all, when I think about royalty, I often think about Blackadder, Queen Lizzie.
Mhm.
Queen Lizzie go plop, plop. This is a line out of Blackadder, so I struggle to take it incredibly seriously when all I can think of is, the writings of Richard Curtis and Rowan Atkinson surrounding a queen figure. But yeah, the queen is dead. Long live the king. We're going to talk tonight, by the way, a conversation that we had yesterday, which I told people about, with Sean Palmer, Dr. Sean Palmer from Monarchy New Zealand. He will be on later on tonight to talk all about that. And look, I get it. I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as a massive monarchist. I'm not necessarily massively into it, but I sort of understand, and I talk about this when I'm talking to Sean. So not to kind of to talk over things twice, but I grew up in the Catholic Church, yeah. And growing up in the Catholic Church, you had this figure, the Pope, who was a pretty significant figure in most Catholic schools and Catholic families' lives. And I would have been 35. I would have been 20, best part of 20 years out of that church. And then Pope John Paul II died. And, he'd always been around. My parents were still involved with the Catholic Church. He'd been a huge part of my upbringing, just being like a figurehead. And I was watching the funeral and I burst into tears. It's like, it was just there. Just from my upbringing, it was just there. And I kind of feel a bit like the Queen for some people. She's just always been there. I mean, basically, unless you were born in the 1940s, she has always been here, and she has always been the Queen. So I get that for some people, it's a really, really, really massive thing. And I get that it's a really sad thing. And I can also see the idea of, what a monarchy is. And because in this day and age, it's really just sort of representational, or not representational. It doesn't have any real power, it's symbolic. It's what I'm trying to say. It's symbolic, and it's a part of the symbolism of this country and of the Commonwealth, and comes with things like Commonwealth Games. And, if we ever went to war, we automatically have a bunch of allies who are involved with defending us and us them. And yeah, it's a big thing for a lot of people. I get it. I'm assuming not for you though, George. The anarchist comes out of you. Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not someone who's like, yes, to be honest with you, I'm fairly ambivalent about the whole thing. Whether we must be a Commonwealth or we must be a republic, I honestly am a bit ambivalent. And look, later on tonight, and it'll be in the second part of the show, we are going to talk a bit more about this. So if you're watching and you want to get your views in about that kind of monarchy versus republic, feel free to fire them through, and we'll save the messages and share them a bit later on. But I'm very ambivalent to it. I'm basically, I don't really care. What about you though, George? What have you been up to? We haven't seen you for a week or so.
Oh, I had a good weekend with my partner's family in Tyree Mouth down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about it. Sort of rented out a house and had a party.
Yeah, good times. For any particular reason, or just having fun with the in-laws?
To celebrate graduation for my partner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And graduated with?
Like
what was the qualification? What was the
masters? Same as me. Yeah.
Very good. So double masters.
Of Arts. Yeah.
And what does that mean? What does that mean in the real world after you've both got masters? What does it mean you're going to go off and do? Either of you going to go into PhDs? Anything above masters?
Oh, maybe one day. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. As always, and we've only just started this, so if you're new to the show and you haven't seen this yet, welcome to the show and welcome to our new little thing that we're doing, which is called Patreon. If you want to join on board and help be a part of the team and help us make what we're calling independent news, no bullshit news, George. I hope we could do no bullshit news would be a nice tagline or a hashtag for us as well. Then you're more than welcome to go and be a patron on the Patreon. And as we talked a little bit about last night, what we're moving to in Patreon is any of our long form interviews, long form interviews, not necessarily the interviews we're having with guests for 10, 15, 20 minutes, but any of those kind of 90-minute plus interviews. Probably, I'm not 100% sure on this yet, but probably the only place you will find those in the future is actually on Patreon. You may get clips in the show, but we're going to start using Patreon to hold a bit more content that people may be interested in seeing who are supporters of what we do. So Big Hairy News, so patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Go check it out. And if you want to be on board, we would love to have you. The other thing about chatting with us tonight, you are more than welcome to do a super chat from YouTube. And super chats, unless they're particularly offensive or let's say illegal, like if it was something that would cause us to get sued, super chats always get mentioned. So if you want your comment to go out, definitely super chat through YouTube, and it will be mentioned as we do it. Right. So tonight's show, we are, as I said, going to talk a bit about the Queen. Some interesting thoughts from Marama Davidson in the House today. Some people are kind of deeming it a bit disrespectful. I think actually now is a perfectly good time to talk about a republic, and it's the appropriate time to talk about that sort of thing. But Marama took some angles in the House about the Crown's responsibility to the treaty and stuff. We'll have a look at a few of the things that she said in the House today. We're also going to be having a look at what's quite an interesting story coming out of Wellington. A group of teenagers, high school students who want to protest, are being told by the Wellington City Council it's going to cost them $5,000 to protest. Well, actually, that's not entirely accurate. It's going to cost them $5,000 to march, because that involves traffic management. Traffic management has a cost. The council has said, you guys need to pay for this. There is more to that story, but actually I'll keep our powder dry a little bit and we'll have a look at that in a wee while. And we're also going to have a look, we're going to start the show actually, and we'll kick it off now, talking about the new COVID restrictions or non-restrictions, the non-traffic light that actually started today. George, I was driving around Dunedin today. I went into a couple of stores. I chose to wear my mask into those stores. And I was going out thinking, 1 in 100 people will be wearing masks today. 1 in 50, 1 in 100, basically hardly anybody. And I have to say, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see quite a few people in stores, and I don't really think in the streets necessarily because it's outside, but in stores and in locations with their masks on. Did you witness anything today? Did you pay attention to any of that kind of stuff? Did you see anyone in masks today? And what do you think about the mask mandates? And you haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, or the non-mask mandate.
Yeah, I didn't notice a difference today, but I wasn't really out and about. I went to a pharmacy, and pharmacies are one of the places where you still wear masks. Yeah, other than that, I mean, you know me, when it comes to this stuff, sort of kind of just leave it to the experts and that sort of thing, and do my own thing in terms of still wearing a mask in certain places. But I'm starting, over the past few months to feel a bit more relaxed about things. Having the superpower of having COVID, and then I think that sort of affected me a little bit. But in terms of my relaxed sort of attitude to it, but I am worried. I am still, because I don't me personally, I don't fucking know what will happen if this leads to a spike or whatever it might be.
One of the points that Anna Brooks made last night, Dr. Anna Brooks, when we talked to her, is like my concerns about the announcement yesterday was the absolute phrasing that the Prime Minister was using. It's safe to go to no traffic lights. Not it's safer, it's safe. Now, as soon as that is said, it's like the message that got put out, which was Omicron's far safer than version 1. Actually wasn't true. The only reason it appeared safer was because of the level of vaccination. But the message that went out there was Omicron's far safer. So people are like, oh, cool, sweet, don't have to worry about it. So when I heard the Prime Minister say that yesterday, that it's safe to go to this level, I was like, well, safer is probably a better word. The word safe is going to give people false hope. And then when that was followed up with, we're going to have our first summer in 3 years where there'll be no interruptions. I'm like, dude, what? How can you be saying that publicly like this? And then when Anna Brooks comes on, she just said very clearly, very abruptly, I don't think anyone's told the virus that yet. I don't know if the virus has agreed that they're not allowed to interrupt our summer yet. And I thought about that a couple of times today. I saw a tweet from someone today saying, I've not got this virus and I will not get this virus. And I just had these words of Anna Brooks in the back of my head going, I wonder if everyone's told the virus that when you're coming through these people, just avoid that one because they've decided they're not going to get it. I had some concerns, but I guess, look, I'm just a Joe Nobody, and I was interested in talking to experts, which we did last night. Now, we may have been the first media outlet to have done that because everyone's doing that today. And we're going to have a look at some of those conversations today. And I like what Simon said Simon says in the chat. I was thinking of walking into a dairy today not wearing a mask. But when I saw a dairy worker wearing a mask, I decided to put it on. I think that's a really lovely community feeling, Simon. And I often think about going to places and seeing all these people sitting around with no masks on and all the people serving them with masks on. And I just, it kind of gives me the willies a little bit because I remember when they did the Met Gala that they have in America where there's got, it's worth millions of dollars and only the most exclusive people go there. And, Ocasio-Cortez goes there and she wears a $25,000 dress that says eat the rich and all that kind of stuff. And they're all swanning around. And while they're swanning around, all the people serving them are in masks. And I'm just like, yeah, what does that say about status in society and about where the working class is versus the opulent lifestyles that other people lead? So I love what Simon just said because I often look at other people and think about what about them? If they're wearing a mask for me, why shouldn't I wear a mask for them? And that sometimes is enough. For me today, I was out and I went into 2 stores, and both stores I went into, I put my mask on. I'm the kind of person that gets out of the store and takes the mask off. So when I'm in the street, out in the public, but in the store, wore the mask. In the store, one of the stores, 1 out of 4 people, actually I was in 3 stores today, 1 out of 4 people had a mask on, like the workers, the others didn't. In the other store, 1 out of 1 person had a mask on. In the other store, I think there was 2 workers and 1 had a mask on. So if workers are still wearing them, I kind of feel like, well, if you are, what that actually means is you're doing it to protect yourself, but also to protect me from you. So I think it's only fair. Can I also say, I think I've also realized that, I don't know if you know that South Park kind of coined the phrase chin diaper. People who wear masks around and they wear them around like this everywhere. And that's how they've been wearing their mask for the last 2 months. If you see someone wearing a chin diaper today or tomorrow or the next day, I now believe that is a clear indication of the intelligence of that person. Because when we had mask mandates in and people did this, they were like, well, I've got my mask on, see? I've got my mask on. And, in other words, they didn't want to wear a mask. So they used to wear a chin diaper, or they do this and have their nose exposed. Now that there's no mask mandates, they don't need to wear a mask. So if anyone's going around like this, they might as well just take it off. So if you see someone tomorrow wearing a chin diaper, in other words, wearing their mask like this, so they've got it on, but they haven't got it on, to me, that's the new definition of the lowest form of intellect in society. Those people should be moved aside if you see any chin diapers from here on in. Just my personal opinion there. Okay, so let's have a look from TVNZ this morning, some commentary around the concerns by some. And the thing is, right, it seems that the concerns are coming from people who are the experts. And the people who aren't the experts, I don't know, like pompous British broadcasters, they seem to be the ones that are saying that New Zealand and the medical advice in New Zealand has been wrong the whole time. But it seems almost with one voice, most experts that I've heard in the last 24 hours are saying, yeah, not quite so sure about this idea. Here's Susie Wiles on TVNZ this morning.
Is it safe to turn the page?
I guess what we have to remember is we're in a lull between waves, so don't get into a false sense of security that this is how it's going to be forever. We do know another wave is likely to come. I guess the thing we have to remember is that the government's response is very much focused on COVID as an acute disease, like what happens to you in the days or weeks after you get it. And so all the measures they're putting in place there are really about how do we make sure that people, who get this don't die. And so that's why the antivirals are being more widely available. That's a great move. We know that being vaccinated is one of those really good protections against that. But it ignores two really important parts about COVID. And one of those is long COVID. And the other one is the risk that you end up with things like an increased risk of a heart attack or a stroke, the other things that happen because of having an infection that don't happen immediately. And those are the things that we really still need protections, public health measures in place to try and avoid. And that's kind of what we've lost.
And because have we moved into a sense of complacency, do you think? People think, it's just a common cold or a bit like the flu.
Very clearly, a lot of people think that, because it's not the same disease it was 2.5 years ago,
Yes.
right? 2.5 years ago, we had nothing. And it was very clear that it was an extremely deadly disease. And I guess it remains that, apart from the fact that we now have some measures that stop it being immediately deadly. What we are not accounting for is the fact that it likely, it does. And the studies are really clear. It increases your chance of death from all causes in the months after you've had an infection, but especially things like heart attack and strokes. So we're not accounting for what happens apart from that immediate kind of thing. And that's what's got me worried, because we need measures in place, not restrictions, measures to try and keep transmission low.
There you go. So that's Susie Wiles this morning. And I think it's really important to remember that some of the stuff that was just said is maths. Of all the areas of education, one of the ones that's hardest to dispute is maths. Statistically speaking, they can have a look at the numbers and they know the death rates and the various and what people die from for decades and decades and decades. So they can see very clearly, for example, about talking about heart attacks and strokes going up after COVID, because they can see who's had COVID and the rate of them having heart attacks in the following few months significantly higher from before COVID, the same group of people, the same sample size, the same age. So they're kind of not challengeable, the numbers, because it's just maths. It's counting people and looking at what is happening to those people. So, there's some debate going on at the moment in the chat, which I'm not going to bring up. I don't care about it, but there's misinformation going around the chat right now about things like, the VIAS report and that kind of stuff. And the VIAS report is a report where people report their vaccine injuries and that kind of stuff, but it's self-reporting. It's got no scientific weight to it whatsoever. And if you actually have a look what's been reported in the VIAS report, and it can be things as small as a sore arm. And then people who want to use the VIAS report as evidence, they say this many cases have been reported to the VIAS report. But things like a sore arm are some of the things that are the stats within the VIAS report. So let's just put that one to bed straight away. Do you want to jump in on any of that, George, before we show the clip from News Hub?
No, I mean, in that clip, she was talking about I guess, sort of some non-mask related stuff around COVID, right? The need to, in terms of peeling back some of these mandates around masks and that sort of thing, that we not add in that complacency when it comes to a strong healthcare system around long COVID or the effects of COVID on your, heart disease or whatever, or lung problems or whatever that might be. So it's almost like, and I'd agree that the end of the mask mandates, whether that's right or wrong, and I don't really have an opinion on it, does sort of signal that maybe we have become that there's a risk of becoming complacent in terms of the longer effects of COVID, because it it simply is no longer this very vivid visual thing that we see in our day-to-day lives of wearing masks, right? We no longer have that reminder of this deadly pandemic that we had just in our day-to-day when we see our fellow human beings.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look. This is a TV3 report on a similar topic, but it's also looking at what's happening in the public today with people being able to do things like going on buses without masks. How did the public respond to it?
Masks may no longer be mandatory on public transport, but passengers are still opting to cover up.
It makes you feel a lot safer, especially on public transport.
I'm keeping mine on for a wee bit, yeah.
Ditching masks on public transport and in supermarkets has left some feeling nervous.
I was a little hesitant, I would have to say.
It'd be a really good idea to keep on with them, particularly for people like me who are immunocompromised.
Some bus drivers agree.
The bus drivers will feel more protected if, passengers wear masks.
They want plastic barriers to protect them.
So that they don't get any sicknesses, and also it actually prevents any assaults as well.
And if you're flying into New Zealand, vaccinations and tests on arrival are no longer legally required, raising the risk of new COVID variants sneaking in.
Lots of other places around the world aren't testing either, means we might not know that new variants have arisen. So that is definitely a concern.
Warning that scrapping restrictions could be a big, expensive mistake, with further waves of the virus likely and no plan in sight.
So the story goes on to talk a bit more about nurses. So back to more professional. So you've had academics talking about this maybe have been a mistake, and then actually getting into the people at the front line, what the nurses are saying about this.
A feeling the nursing workforce shares.
The mandates need to stay. This is huge. This is significant, and we've got a workforce in crisis.
There was no longer that grounds to maintain the mandate, given the high rates of vaccination, but also given the amount of COVID that people have experienced.
But while COVID cases might be dropping, the workload for hospitals isn't. Emergency departments around the country are still under massive pressure, and the sector's worried about how it'll cope with future surges in cases.
We've got a workforce that's already depleted. So our ability to respond in a timely way is going to be our major concern.
A concern they're hoping the government hears. Alexa Cook, News Hub.
There you go. And there's been more response today, I guess, George, and you can jump in here and start sharing a bit of your stuff. I've seen the report of this, but I haven't heard this yet, that we've got a group of professionals. Maybe we'll do one other thing first of all. Maybe just to reiterate, if people weren't with us last night, I made a clip off last night's show. It's about 4 minutes long. And we had 4 of New Zealand's top experts on last night. We had Dr. Anna Brooks, Professor Michael Plank, we had communication from Susie Wiles and communication from Dr. David Welsh. All of the people that the media and the government are speaking to at times to get information and stuff on COVID. We asked all of them one question, which was sort of the real world application of what's going on. As the people at the pointy end of the stick, what are you going to be doing tomorrow, meaning today, when it comes to the mask mandate? Will you be sort of just going back life normal right now? Because if the people who are actually there doing the research, seeing the research, what are they going to be doing? And actually, I think we will play this now just for people to see, and then we'll come back and have a look at the vast number of intellects who are saying that it's what we've been doing in New Zealand is a bad thing, George. We'll do that in a second. So here's the clip from last night. I'm trying to ask this of a few people through the day since the announcement, and I've said all the way through, I've probably said this to you, Michael, that especially since Omicron's come in and especially since we moved to Orange, I'd like to try and get my information from people like you and from Anna Brooks and from Michael Baker, as opposed to necessarily from the 9th floor. I'm no conspiracy theorist, not saying the 9th floor is out to hurt anyone, but sometimes it seems that some people who are at the pointy end are saying something slightly different from the people, after it goes through what the consensus for the country is. So I was just thinking after the announcement, people like yourself who are in the thick of it, I'm someone who kind of goes to the supermarket most days. I buy little things, and I thought I was at the supermarket today and I wore my mask, and what would I do tomorrow when I don't have to? And I thought, I want to ask you guys that question. So if you were in a place today where you had to wear a mask, like a petrol station or a supermarket or a general place, today, what will you be doing tomorrow, actually, you personally?
I should start off by saying I don't often go into shops. We generally get our groceries online or do the click and collect thing.
But somewhere, might attend.
Yeah. Will I change what I'm doing? I don't. Probably not. At least to start with, I think. I think I already sort of consider a little bit when should I wear a mask and when don't I, and that I probably won't change anything too drastically straight away. But I think over time, you do reevaluate that a little bit. And perhaps the situations where I wear a mask now are not quite the same as what they were in March. Of this year. So I think gradual reevaluation of that sort of thing is okay.
So today, right? You're at the supermarket today, under the current regulations, must wear a mask, etc. You're going to the supermarket tomorrow, Anna. Are you changing any of your habits? Are you changing any of your practice?
No, masking all the way. And the one thing that I just will find completely frightening is public transport. Like getting on an aeroplane. I just saw a messaging just before about, the fact that, planes are saying, our airlines are saying, yay, no more masking. It's like, is that the next one going to be, yay, no more staff. They're all sick with COVID.
No more flights.
No more flights. Oh, we're going to cancel all your holidays because there's no staff. So that's the thing. That's what masking does. It keeps people in business. And of course, yes, the cases are coming down. But that's just because, we had safety precautions. If a whole plane is now all bets are off, there might be a staff member on every plane that is exposed daily. So no, masking needs to be there. We in these circumstances that don't feel safe.
So this is the response from Dr. David Welch. You might be interested to see this as well, Anna. So same question to him, are you going to change your behaviors tomorrow? His response was, I've been easing off in my mask use the last couple of weeks with low numbers, but still wearing it in class and in meetings at work. So no immediate change. We'll probably keep it on in shops too, especially if they're busy. That's sort of what I'm saying. In those confined spaces, Dr. David Welsh says that. Susie Wiles as well. I asked her, and she says, I'm definitely not changing my behaviour, and I'm going to be watching the COVID wastewater data to see how the prevalence is changing. And apologies for those. I was putting this together at 2 minutes to 10. I should have spread those out better. But so keeping an eye on the wastewater. So I guess kind of doing their own numbers to see if looks like cases are going up officially via wastewater, which is probably the best way to look at things now, isn't it? Because people who aren't reporting. So that means out of the 5 people I approached, and I did ask Michael Baker as well, but obviously busy man, didn't hear back from him. So this is the list of people I've been talking to. You, Michael Plank, Susie Wiles, David Welsh, all basically saying not going to change mask usage tomorrow from today. So there you go. And look, I mean, I would normally just continue on and not even address it, but for people in the chat who are talking about these experts just have opinions. Some of these experts, Anna Brooks, for example, is literally in the labs doing the testing. There aren't many people who are more at the forefront of this, investigating this with this, literally under the microscope, than people like Anna Brooks. So, people are welcome to, question the credibility of the people we're speaking to. That's, I guess, your right to do so. But the reality of the people we're speaking to is some of the most informed, up to date. That's why they're disagreeing with the government. I asked Anna Brooks last night, who are the medical experts that the government's talking to? And her response was like, yeah, it's a good question, because there's a consensus of medical experts who are disagreeing with primarily what the government's saying, although most of them are still acknowledging it's going to happen at some stage. And look, it's such an easy thing, George. Sometimes I think it's so easy to break it down. We did a report last week, I can't remember whether it was with you or with Chewy, where schools in Canterbury were saying since the mask mandates have come back, their roles have gone from 46% to 86% because the kids aren't getting sick. Why did the doctors wear masks when they're doing open heart surgery? Because it reduces significantly the risk of the doctor passing something on to the patient. It's just such a nonsense conversation now. It's such a nonsense conversation that I'm not even going to address it like directly to the conversation that's going on in the chat. But I've said that, and I'll leave it with that. So, time to throw it to you, George, who has queued up something that I haven't heard yet. I've seen the story about the thing you're about to play, but I haven't heard the actual clip, because a lot of the New Zealand experts and experts around the world are kind of going, whoa, what's this might be a bit too quick, but too soon. And look, one of the reasons they're saying too quick is because it's not even necessarily about the risk factor of things like death now, but it's about we could be better prepared. Like, so for example, if the next round of boosters were available to everybody, that could be a way to get the country even better prepared for this. But there are some people around the world, I don't know what kind of label they'd have as experts, George, being broadcasters from the UK, who are saying we've done poorly, this is bad, the government's cocked up. Do you want to take it over from there and tell us what we're going to hear?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're hearing Piers Morgan. So I went through this to find what you were looking for, and I was surprised, just as an aside, by Tova's sort of gushing, glowing admiration for this man.
Right.
But maybe that's a story for another day. This is just I think I've got her question in here.
You remember calling our red light settings draconian back in January. Can you believe, Piers, that our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has only just scrapped that traffic light system yesterday?
It's amazing to me that she has dug herself into this position where she got all the plaudits early on for, in my view, quite rightly being very draconian in the early days before we had vaccines. But the moment you have successful vaccines, and a number of them, you have got to get back to normal life and protect the vulnerable and elderly. And she just seemed like a rabbit in headlights, frozen in her own self-glory, if you like, about how popular she was by being so draconian. But she was right to be tough early on, and I applauded her. But if you carry that on after you've got successful vaccines, you're going to end up where she is now, which is increasingly unpopular, paralyzing the country completely unnecessarily. She looked to me like somebody who felt like the only way she could be popular was to stick to her original messaging on this, when in fact facts change. When facts change, you have to change the message.
I think she's paying for a lot of decisions of the recent past now.
Doesn't that just speak to who he is? Like his biggest focus there and his biggest concern is the idea that someone might not be popular anymore. So he's more concerned that someone is popular than is potentially making the right or wrong decision. Let's be fair and say if it was a different decision. So he's like, well, look, she's suffering because she's no longer as popular. It's like, who gives a fuck if she's popular? I'm sure she doesn't care if she's not popular, if she thinks they're the best decisions. But I guess that speaks to a bloated and inflated ego that, and I guess many of us who have worked in the media, the reality is, as horrible as it sounds, we have to work to applause, That's part of our payment, whether you're on stage and you get it, or whether you're in a radio station and that becomes the ratings, or whatever it is, there's an element that you have to portray that. But when you're a fucking government official trying to do what's best for a country, popularity is not the thing you try and drive towards. Good science is the things that you try and drive towards. It's just, I hadn't heard that until just then, but I find it hilarious that his big criticism is, well, she's not as popular as she will. I think that speaks more to him than anybody else, perhaps, George.
Yeah. I mean, he gets excitably angry when he's talking about females, especially. I've noticed when he's talking about Prince Harry's missus. What's her name?
Meghan.
And he gets pretty angry in this interview about them as well. Some disgraceful lies, because the interview as a whole was actually about the monarch stuff and the Queen and all that sort of thing, but Tova adds that in there, and we like Rob's comment there.
Yes, Piers Morgan, the world-renowned virologist. Look, you know what? Like I said before, maths is fun. We can actually look to see if what New Zealand has done has been good or bad. Piers Morgan, whoever the fuck he thinks he is to comment on it, is now saying that what we've done is wrong, right? What we've done is wrong. And we can check that because there is data, and we can look at numbers, which we are about to do, right? So here's New Zealand on this is the deaths and everything, total recovery, everything from around the world, and I've ranked it based on population. Right, just under 5 million people. If you go to say 6 million to 4 million, or let's say it's 5 million. Now, if we just look at the deaths, for example, from 6 million down, 1,600, 7,000, 386 in Congo. I'm sure that won't be a particularly accurate information, but 7,000, nearly 6,000, 4,000, 20,000, 5,000, 4,000, 294 in Liberia, nearly 9,000, nearly 8,000. Central African Republic, I think that is 130, and then New Zealand under 3,000. If we go below New Zealand to Panama, 8,500, about the same as New Zealand, 2,500, yet their population is 700,000 people left. Croatia, which is 4 million people, 16,000 deaths. Moldova, which is 4 million people, 11,000 deaths. And that's basically, if I'm being fair, there's one more there. Georgia, 4 million people, 16,000 deaths. So if we got it so wrong, why are the numbers looking so good compared to most other places that are similar our size? If we got it so wrong, the other criticism you could say was about our economy. And really, other than Australia, we don't really have any countries in the world at the moment that are similar to us. Japan's not the same, China's not the same, that have lower inflation than we've got. Yes, inflation's bad. I get it. I'm with you. But compared to places like the UK, compared to France, maybe France is below us actually. I've got to remember that. But the US, our akin type places, ours is doing much, much better than many other countries. So it appears to me that our death rate is better. Our economy is better, certainly than the UK, but bloated Piers Morgan is talking about that possibly we should be doing what the UK did. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. And yes, he's probably good talent and he probably makes for a good story, but I'm just not buying it. Sorry, I'm done with it. I'm done with him. It's like this is the decision our country made. We're living with it. And now I guess we're moving forward, right or wrong. The experts are saying maybe not quite like this. The Piers Morgans of the world are saying, of course, you should have done this 6 months ago. And now time will tell. A sad thing to say, but I guess that's the reality. So let us, unless you've got anything else you want to add there, George, we're about to move on.
Okay.
You're a protester. Would you say you're a protester?
Mm-hmm.
Very quick little story
from
here.
Way back.
Okay, I'll bow to you a little bit on the expertise in this. I've been on protests, but I wouldn't call myself someone who's actively a protester. So there was a climate strike. There's been 2 climate strike marches by students around the country this year, right? Let me read the story, because the latest story has just come out of Wellington that school climate strikers, we would have to pay $5,000 to protest safely. Wellington City Council left school strikers scrambling to raise $5,000 for private traffic management services because the students wanted to march against government climate inaction. School strike for climate Wellington. A group of school-age students plan to walk to Parliament next Friday, but did not have the money or options to raise cash. The council covered the cost of the 2 previous marches. The council's actions infringe on their civil right to protest, the students argue, but the council says it covered the cost twice before and explained to the strikers in June that it wouldn't fund a 3rd protest. One of the students said he was disappointed by the council's decisions. We can't march. Our voices are silenced. Hutt Valley school student Izzy Cook said protesting is a civil right. By being required to pay this massive cost, we feel as though our right to protest is being denied. As young volunteers, the School Strike for Climate chapter contacted other climate groups and advocates to find some financial support, but have not been able to raise the full $5,000. Climate change is the most pressing issue we face as a society, one of them said. Protest action is one of the few ways that young people can express their climate concerns. We cannot decide who is in council or government, so it's clearly harder for us to have our say. The school strike will go ahead on September 23. Rather than marching, the students will gather on parliamentary grounds, and I'm sure they won't turn it into a camping ground. Is there one more? I've got one more lap tab there. Oh, this was one of the councillors. One of the councillors there, Samantha Paul, supported the students in their efforts to secure council funding. Council officers, rather than the elected councillors, make the decision and allocated the money. She said, While not the only disenfranchised group, young school strikers don't have any other avenue in democracy beyond protest and submissions, Paul said. If it was up to me, I'd get council to pay for it, she added. It's such a tiny amount of money to make sure they're safe. Paul offered to make a private donation. They only need a couple of thousand. So there you go. I don't think the private donation amounted to the entire amount, but there you go. That's what it was. What do you reckon, George? Teenagers wanting to protest, council going, this is going to cost $5,000. We've done it twice before, and we've covered the cost twice before, but this time it's on you guys.
I think the council definitely should pay for the traffic management. I have a feeling that that this is an effect of something that I talked about a lot during the occupation of Parliament. That the whole fucking hysteria around that protest was going to be used as and the attitude towards that protest, unfounded or not, it's another matter, is used as a precedent to suppress further protests, no matter what the cause was, right? And I think that this is a hangover from the occupation of Parliament and that sort of thing, that basically the council seems to have made a decision that all protests now will be paying. Remember, there was the Christchurch situation as well, in terms of paying for traffic management. They basically said no, all of them are going to pay for that themselves now. That's sort of what I suspect.
I mean,
something sort of warned against anyway.
Without sounding like the old curmudgeon in the group, it's like I do kind of smirk a little bit when they say they're silencing, we can't protest, and then the last part of the story I read was they're heading to Parliament grounds. So they are still protesting, they're just not marching. So I don't see how anyone can make the claim, albeit they're teenagers and I want to encourage, their social dissidence. No problems about that at all. But the reality is no voices are being silenced here. Maybe some gentle and easy exercises being silenced because they can't actually march down the streets necessarily, but they're still going to be outside Parliament, on Parliament grounds, protesting, having their voices heard. No one's squashing their voices. They're just putting restrictions around how they can have their voices and where they can have their voices shared. I'm sure they could have their voices shared in the city if they want. They just can't stop traffic. So I love the enthusiasm of these young guys. I think it's great, and I think that's how you get people who change the world in their 20s and 30s. If you start when you're in your teens, and I always support what they're doing, but I will equally, if it was my kids, be saying to them, well, you can't do that. I mean, like, let's be silly and said if they then decided to do this every Saturday for the next 2 years, and it was $5,000 every Saturday for the next 2 years, would we all be cool with, like, sweet as, let's pay it, not a problem? There probably needs to be a line drawn somewhere. Is after 2 the line? Maybe not. Well, is after 50 the line? Probably so. I don't know.
We should be doing a fuckload more than that because the world is going to burn to a crisp and flood at the same time. So,
but no one's. But they can. But
shut
they
the fucking streets down every day. I mean,
well, that's the other thing though. The making a social action that just goes against the rules anyway. I mean, that's always a possibility. I mean, Destiny tried to do that in Auckland, and Brian Tamaki got delivered a fine because he was the identifiable person in it. I mean, I don't know. How would we feel about picking our 16-year-olds up from the cop shop because they'd stop the street? Anyway, maybe some of us would be quite proud of that and think good on you for doing it. Maybe others wouldn't be. I come back to that idea that no one's voices are being squashed because they can't walk down a street. Whether we agree they should be able to walk down that street or not, no one's voices are being
I would encourage them to civil disobedience and to do it anyway. Yeah, definitely. I think their voices are being minimized by this.
Well, you might, but I might agree with you in minimized, but I don't think that was the claim. Look, I'm not trying to beat up on these teenagers.
The nitpicking at their claims is, I don't know. It seems like the bigger issue here is that the council's not paying for their traffic management.
Should there be any line at all, though? I mean, I get it, because this is sometimes, and maybe this is another conversation that's going on at the moment behind the scenes of the show, is that it seems easy for us to get in behind, groups that we agree with the agenda or the narrative of. What if it was the contrary? What if it was Destiny Church doing this for what they believe to be the right reason? Would we be cool with the council paying for that? What if it was, I don't know, neo-Nazis, etc., etc., etc.? I mean, would we be okay with that as well, the council paying for it?
No, you that you would have a system where the council is representative of the people, and you can say, no, we're not going to pay for neo-Nazis to walk down our streets.
But isn't that what they've done? They're saying, no, we're not going to pay for students to walk down the streets.
Yeah.
But that's what they've done. So it's all good.
Wait, no, you would have a council that is representative of the people. The people say, no, we don't want to pay for people to walk down the streets. You use it as a political tool.
So the people, you're saying the council represents the people's view. So are you saying that the people's view of Wellington would be, we don't know this, but the conjecture is the people of Wellington probably would be fine with this. And if the people of Wellington were fine with this, the council should represent that view.
You can't have like this sort of neutral, apolitical arbiter that says this is the line. Everyone is going to be get their traffic management paid for. We need to see this as a political body that can say, well, actually, all these kids can walk down the street. We'll pay for their traffic management. The National Front, we're not going to pay for their traffic management.
And this is the thing.
That's not unfair. That's well, it is. It's unfair because it's politics. It's the division of power.
But this is the thing.
That's how I see it anyway.
I don't disagree with what you're saying about who I would like to see walking down the street and who I would not like to see walking down the street. But I think that when you come to a council, maybe they don't have the ability to do that because, I mean, okay, let's not use neo-Nazis. That's a hard one because it's pretty easy to say that not a good representation of a council. But if it was just a view that we didn't espouse to and didn't agree with, but it was a prevalent view within society, a 40% view, I think that sometimes councils, bodies, organizations do need to draw a line because that's the only way they can be fair to everyone. Or it's the only way they can make sure the most abhorrent views don't get to do what the views we want to support, the normie views get to do. Because if you do it for one group, they've got a right, another group's got the right to claim it as well. So I don't know. I do hear what you're saying, dude. I'm not actually necessarily disagreeing with the concept of what you're saying, but I guess I'm thinking about the practical real world application that if you fund all of them all the time, or even half of them half the time, then the ones you don't fund have got the ability to use that to say we've been discriminated against.
These are the sort of decisions that councils make all the time, right? They have vested interests that they put their money into, right? They don't just like spread it around equally to every party involved. Right? We have this idea that institutions are these like sort of weird, like inhuman things that somehow can equally disperse power and all this kind of thing. And politics doesn't seem to work like that.
Well, and I guess
I'd never claim to have all the answers like other people seem to.
The other thing, I guess, as we were saying about this, is I'm just reminding of a line I just read. Council officers are the people that make the decision for allocating the money, not the elected officials. If this was an elected official's decision, then maybe we'd see more of a nuanced position as to what you've got to say. If it's a council officer, i.e. a non-elected person, maybe they do need to be more impartial. Maybe that's the difference. Because then people could actually campaign on it. This is free speech, and I will make sure we cover off these things, and that'll be part of our. But if it's a council official who's got a budget and they have to say you can or can't, probably a lot easier. When I say easier, I mean more realistic that they will be black and white, as opposed to the other.
So how does that officer make their decisions then?
I don't know. It's a good question. But maybe
how do they?
But maybe what you've said earlier is maybe what it's because of all the hubbub at the moment, what's going on around at the moment, maybe they have just drawn a line in the sand saying from now on people are paying for it. I don't know. Maybe there's a rule which not in here that says we'll pay for the first two, and from then on they have to pay for themselves no matter who they are. Don't know. I mean, I don't think it's. I don't want to say it's not unreasonable to pay for the first two and then get them to pay, because I actually would encourage these 16-year-olds to get out there and do it, But I don't think it's unreasonable to think about a council saying, when we can't cover these actions forever, for always, until the end of time. So there needs to be, I mean, I'm being really silly, George, and you'll roll your eyes at me, but imagine if there was someone who wanted to do it every single day, a group who want to do it every single day. Obviously there needs to be a way that they can say no. And I can't answer your question as to how it is, but I guess the conversation then is this the time to say no? I mean, you're saying it's not. I guess I'm probably saying it's not as well, but kind of trying to expand on it and think, well, when would be?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my view would be not to depend on the fucking council for anything and just
Yeah, it's
do it
true.
anyway. Because these kids are, they're very passionate. I mean, I don't know, maybe if our institutions did place climate change as something important, then they'd say, yeah, go for it. But, I don't know about, council's decision making and stuff, but maybe they should protest anyway, because it doesn't seem like, they get the traffic management paid for.
It's probably also a thing that because they're young, they're teenagers and stuff, they're more likely to abide by what the council's told them to. It seems like they are. Whereas these other groups, be they Destiny or be they whoever else, will just go ahead anyway. Because, adults making that decision against the council probably feel a bit more emboldened than a bunch of 16-year-olds having their parents saying, guys, we really support you in doing this, but I don't really want to pick you up from the police station. So there's that element as well, I guess. That, and look, it'll be really interesting to see how many people turn. I wonder what's happening in Dunedin, if anything, because this was a nationwide movement previously. I had kids of mine and friends of my kids go on the last one. So it'll be interesting to see if this is happening in all other centres, or has this been organised just in Wellington? And if it is happening in all other centres, what are those councils doing?
Yeah, I think the climate change is such that it can't be solved by a whole bunch of council mandated protests by 16-year-olds, right? It's gonna take something pretty catastrophic probably for things to change. It would take a whole rewrite of the current systems and power, how power is distributed in society, a whole bunch of different things. But these kids are trying to highlight the issue at least, and so giving them Lambton Key or whatever the fuck, whatever.
Hey, let's scream on, because I've got an interview still to play that's 10-12 minutes, and I don't want to be here at midnight. But yeah, look, I think we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll find out what's happening more about it as we get closer to it. But I mean, the other thing is totally fully supportive behind these kids getting out there and protesting. When they do it, we'll cover it and we'll tell you what's going on when it's happening. And if you want to get along and support them as well, then we'll get your kids along to support them. If that's the age you are, like me, then we'll let you know about it on the 23rd or the 22nd when it's coming up. Let's have a look at the situation around the Queen at the moment. We haven't really talked about this yet. Friday turned into a different show. Last night we were going to talk about it, but COVID kind of took it over. But the thing about not really covering off too much on it so far is that we have had a chance for the story to expand a little bit. New Zealand has announced they're going to have an official holiday in 10 days from now, a day off to mourn the Queen. I think that's actually kind of cool. I know people are like David Seymour are like, oh no, I shouldn't fucking have that. But I actually think it's kind of cool because, like I said earlier in the show about my relationship with like the Pope was always there, was a part of it. That actually, for a lot of New Zealanders, stopping in any a reason for a party to celebrate a person passing who's been a part of your life forever, I think that's actually okay. And I think that business can suck it up, basically, personally. And I think that's going to be I think it's a nice gesture as well. I think it's a nice gesture. But what's happened subsequently is more information has come out about what the government's doing and how the government's reacting to it. This is from News Hub this evening, and this is in the House, what is being talked about. Marama Davidson went down a slightly different path from everybody else, talking about the Crown's relationship with Maori, what it meant post the passing of Queen Elizabeth II.
Mostly dressed in black and in muted tones, politicians paid tribute to the Queen.
She was quite simply an extraordinary woman who was of her time and now in passing is for all time.
I rise on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition, and yes, that pronoun still feels unfamiliar.
I did wonder if perhaps she was just holding on until her country was safe from Boris Johnson.
The question of what her service was in aid of is certainly a legitimate one. And
I don't know if you noticed this. It looks like all the Green Party still in masks. Not much of anyone else is. Just a little observation today.
yes, a question for this very time.
For Marama Davidson, the Queen's memory and legacy is complicated.
We cannot ignore the oppression of Maori as very real and continuing.
And the Queen, she says, was never ignorant to that.
For example, her well-known utterance about the Treaty of Waitangi being imperfectly observed in her words. She knew what she was a part of.
The irony not lost on Davidson that morning a monarch suppressed plans for Te Wiki o Te Reo.
I am today still doing the work to reclaim my own native tongue.
The righteous anger of Indigenous peoples all over the world. And I take those stories as stories that I carry with me.
Rawiri Waititi saying, though, now is not the time.
Our tikanga is clear. We must give time for whānau to grieve their losses.
With Parliament now adjourned out of respect, the Prime Minister heads to the United Kingdom tomorrow ahead of the Queen's funeral. Also among the delegation are Kingi Tuhētia, Willie Apiata, Dame Sylvia Cartwright and Sir Tiffany O'Regan. The Prime Minister says the broad representation a testament to the Queen's long relationship with Aotearoa. Amelia Wade, News.
So there you go. So that's what's been going on there. I did think it was a really interesting point about the passing of the Queen. Obviously, nothing to do with the Queen, but the passing of the Queen, ironically suppressing Māori Language Week in its 50th anniversary or the 50th year from the celebrations of the Māori language, which is a point that Marama made, which I thought was interesting, and it did make me think as well. Complete side point here: why is it that we have Māori Language Week, but we have New Zealand Music Month, and we have a Pride Month? I wonder why Māori language only gets a week. I thought about that today as well, but that's a side note. Anyway, Marama's thoughts around what we're looking at and celebrating. George, got any thoughts, mate?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I got nothing. Like, I don't really respect the monarchy. I couldn't give two shits, really. I think this is just, death cult shit. It's just like public masturbation over some lady that people felt they had a connection with. I can't fucking stand it, really. To be honest, yeah.
So what will you be doing on the 23rd with your day off?
It's the 23rd? 26th?
Or 26th? I can't remember. It's a Monday.
Not working.
Yeah. Nice. Taking the day off. We give them something. Yeah. Hey, also just another side note I was thinking as well, because we haven't covered up on this, speaking of Marama, is whilst we've been over the last few days, James Shaw got re-elected as the Greens co-leader after that debacle. And I really loved it, George, when we were talking about this last time, because you kind of switched it on me a little bit when I said that 30% voting against it was stopping something, and you said no, that 30% voting against it was starting something. That was starting the process to look for a leader. Which I really respected, and it kind of changed my position on that conversation. But now it seems that it is a little bit, I don't know, it feels to me a little bit of a waste of time that they've spent all that time, effort, and inches and column inches, so to speak, to go back to exactly the same leader when they could have done it straight away and saved a whole bunch of time. But I guess is what it is, and that's been announced over the weekend. That's probably good for us to pick up on. So can I say then for you, George, does that mean that, I mean, from how you've just stated it very, very publicly, is that you would be like, we should be a Republican? Do you think that you want us to be a Republic, or you just don't care in general because all of these systems have flaws in them, and what does it matter?
Oh, yeah. No, like, a Republic, I think, would be a good way to go, yeah. If I had to be drawn on something, if my mood was in the right place, yeah, for sure, I think.
There's an opinion piece in the Herald today. It says, to become a republic or not, that is the question many New Zealanders will ponder following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Discussions about breaking away from the monarchy have increased in recent years. The connection is now seen as largely symbolic, which it obviously it is, with New Zealand becoming increasingly independent from Great Britain. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said that in her lifetime she expected the shift from a constitutional monarchy to a republic to take place. Former Prime Minister Sir John Key said he believed New Zealand would only ever do so after Australia had made that move. This thing is actually, I think this is a really interesting point. I think this is probably the most interesting point to becoming a monarchy, because I think all of us kind of go, that will happen at some stage. At some stage that will happen, that will be the case. But University of Auckland's law school professor, Dr. Claire Charder, said this, yeah? She says that scratching slightly deeper to a split from the monarch could open a, quote, huge can of constitutional worms, she said. It would involve not only establishing a new head of state, but new parliamentary and judicial systems, a new relationship with Māori, at least on paper. Charters said there were mixed views among Māori on whether to become a republic or maintain a relationship with the Crown. Te Tiriti o Waitangi was a contract, a treaty signed between the Crown of England and the Māori of New Zealand. It enshrined the mana and status of iwi Māori and espoused a partnership role with the Crown. Charters said while becoming a republic would remove the Crown as a partner, those obligations could, in theory, be carried on to the new head of state. At a minimum, we would need to ensure the state recognise the obligations under Te Tiriti, she said. The modern reality of the relationship was also that Māori already dealt with the government and not the Crown. But it is, I mean, I'm not sure if I've thought about that before, but it is an interesting perspective to go, once the Crown is taken away, how does that original document still work in New Zealand for today? So yeah, I think that's probably maybe legally the biggest sticking point, because I think most of us would agree at some stage it's likely to happen anyway, but that's probably going to be the big constitutional issue, isn't it? How that actually works itself out. Well, here we go. So I have got a pre-recorded conversation coming up now, George, with Dr. Sean Palmer.
Okay.
I will thank you for your time and joining us today. It's always good to see you. And I guess we'll catch you again super soon. So everyone can wave to George. Bye, George. Bye,
See you, folks.
Bye, George. We'll see you next time. Appreciate you. And Nala and I will continue on for the next wee while. I will still be here in studio, but this is a pre-recorded conversation with the chair of Monarchy New Zealand, talking about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II and a few other things as well. It is Dr. Sean Palmer. He is the chair of Monarchy New Zealand. Dr. Sean Palmer joins us. Sean, hello to you, sir.
Hello.
Lovely to see you again. I haven't seen you in probably close to a decade, when we talked about all sorts of royal things and various media outlets. So I'm very grateful you took my call today and happy to jump in and have a chat about the events of the last 3 or 4 days.
Well, thank you. I don't think either of us has aged a day in a decade.
Hey, I noticed that, and here's Monarchy New Zealand. Here's the website, monarchy.org.nz. Obviously, with a big banner on the moment announcing the sad news of the Queen passing away. I actually did see a headline, I think, on Thursday night, talking about the Queen's health. It might have been Wednesday night, it might have been Thursday night, but the next thing I noticed, it was a headline: the Queen had passed away. Was this a bit of a build up for several days and weeks, or because that feels very quick to me that there was an announcement and then the next thing I knew she had passed?
Yeah, I saw that headline as well. I think it was Thursday night, and my immediate reaction was skepticism towards the media, because the media claim that the sky is falling when it comes to the Queen's health all the time.
Right.
And I sort of brushed that off in hindsight far too easily. The article did mention that Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine were headed up to where the Queen was, and that maybe should have tipped us off that this was more than the usual health scare. But it was a very short period of time. She had appeared with Prime Minister Truss in a photo just a day or two before that, and people said, well, she's 96 years old. We don't expect her to look like a spring chicken, but she seemed well enough. And it shows you how fast these things can change.
And I mean, don't want to be morbid. This is a natural question, but do we have an announcement of the cause of death?
I haven't actually heard anything on that. That's a really interesting point. I'm not exactly sure what the process would be for that. Whether one would need a coroner's report in order to make that distinction, that decision or not. Obviously, she has been transported to Holyrood Palace now. So I'm not sure if there's been any further examination.
I guess that just means natural causes, 96, sort of to be expected.
I think so. I mean, admittedly, on Friday, a lot of people asked me, were you shocked by this? And I said, well, when you're dealing with someone who's 96, you know that the inevitable is not terribly far away, but nevertheless, it is a shock on the day that it happens.
Yeah. Because been Queen since, what is it, 53, 52, 53, 70 years, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, so 52. So for most of us, most people in the country have never experienced anything other than Queen Elizabeth. I mean, obviously, if you were born prior to that, so if you were born prior to 1953, and there are many New Zealanders who are, but certainly not the majority, you've experienced something else. It's a very, very strange situation to start thinking about using the word king. It's a very strange situation to start thinking about, God Save the King being a national anthem. But you are the chair of Monarchy New Zealand. What about personally for you? How did it hit you over the weekend? How were you feeling on Friday?
Well, again, that shock was quite palpable. My phone, unfortunately, had been on Do Not Disturb until 6 a.m. So I woke up to a lot of messages and missed calls as the media were trying to reach out to me. And there was a little bit of disbelief. I thought I really better.
So how did you find out? Yeah, how did you actually find out that it had happened?
Oh, a number of colleagues had messaged me. And unfortunately, it didn't make a beat when it came in. So yeah, but in terms of that Friday, yeah, I must say I was so busy working with the media, trying to get the facts about the monarchy out there, talk about the significance of the crown and of the Queen's life and role, that I really didn't have much time to think about it from my own perspective.
Right.
At the time. And just over the last few days, as I've had a bit more time to consider it, it's been a slow process. There's a lot of disbelief. And I think a lot of people around the world are feeling that this era has come to an end. Yeah. And it happened very quickly. And it's almost hard to believe. As you say, 70 years.
Yeah.
If you're a 70-year-old individual, this is still your entire lifespan. And it's interesting how these people are a part of our psyche and a part of our makeup. And for you in particular, I can relate to maybe how you're feeling a bit, or how you were feeling when you heard it. I grew up Catholic, but sort of left all that when I was 16. When I left school, I sort of left everything else, But when Pope John Paul II died, I mean, I can remember where I was living, because I can remember watching the funeral on the TV. So I guess I was probably mid-30s, maybe not 40, mid-30s, maybe in that. I could look it up if I wanted to, but yeah, around that. And I burst into tears watching his funeral. And it's not that necessarily had anything to do with my beliefs or a practice that I held on to with anything. I hadn't been involved with that organization since I was 16, but it was ingrained. Always there, this figure who had always been there, who obviously I was heavily influenced by their I guess teachings or beliefs or whatever, organization for my formative years, and with, I mean, different for you because you're actually working in this field, but these figures get into our lives and they impact us. And I even heard, and I know some people are teasing old Mike Hosking for his reaction talking to his missus on radio when he burst into tears, but they get in and they're there and they're part of everything we know and understand, and they're a part of the norm of the world. And so when they're not there, the norm of the world has changed. Absolutely. Look, there was a question that was presented to me on Friday. They said, could you pick a few iconic moments from her life that you'll always remember? And the challenge to me, I said to them, was that it's not so much the specific moments as that constant background presence that was always there. And I fully sympathize with what you're saying in terms of it's very easy for us to feel disengaged from the monarchy and members of the royal family who are on the other side of the world. But it is deeply woven into the fabric of the country. And, a classic example I give is to say that there are more than 100 million portraits of Queen Elizabeth in New Zealand.
In New Zealand? Hang on. You said 100 million.
100 million portraits. And everyone says, now that can't possibly be true.
Oh, are you talking money?
Exactly.
Gotcha. No,
Exactly.
so I got you. Oh, you didn't catch me out there, Sean. I got you in the end.
You got there in the end. But you see, that's the key, is that it is so present, to something that we might use on a daily basis. And yet we don't even think about it.
Was there any conversation, obviously not from your perspective, but when you and I last talked and last did something in broadcasting, it was Kate and Wells, and the world was swooning over Kate and Wells, and there was this push by some. There was the kind of monarchist Republican conversation, and there was a push by some within the monarchist world that if we were to stay, maybe Charles is getting a bit old, maybe we should leapfrog him and maybe we should go straight to William. I'm sort of surprised that I mean, I know that people will say it's disrespectful to have the Republican conversation now. Personally, I think it's a good time. We're not doing it obviously at the moment, but it's a good time to have it at the transitional time. But I'm surprised there's been no real conversation around the process of, does everyone want Charles? Because I remember you telling me, Sean, that I actually think you mentioned Canada and specifically, like if Canada wanted William as their king, they could do that. So there could be different kings for different countries should they want to. But that conversation doesn't seem to have. I mean, I'm not saying it would come from the royals, but that doesn't seem to have happened at all. It's just moved so quickly. It's King Charles and conversation over.
Well, that's right. In fact, the legislation that determines who's next, it was never up to Charles or up to Queen Elizabeth as to who would be the successor. It was all laid out in legislation in each of these individual countries. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the UK, they've all got legislation that determines this. And it's all essentially word for word identical so that it ensures that it's the same person. The last time that legislation was changed was a short time after the royal wedding there. It must have been 2012, 2013, when Prince George was on the way, because they said, you know what, as the rules stand now, an elder sister loses out to a younger brother. And they said, we need to make this gender balanced. So a concerted effort was made to change it and say eldest child regardless of sex. And there was a moment where we made a change. And there hasn't been a change in the process since then. So it was always going to be King Charles III as next. And we know it will be William V after that. And then probably George VII.
How do you feel about King Charles? Like, I mean, as the monarch, how does that make you feel? As him as a person being the leader of the Commonwealth, how do you feel about that?
Well, I must start by saying it still takes a lot of getting used to say the king.
To say that word, I know.
Yeah. It's a very peculiar experience.
King's birthday weekend,
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I wasn't there for the 70 years of the Queen's reign. I was only there for about 40 of it, and still that's a huge change to me. In terms of him personally, I think ultimately he's going to do a very good job. I think he's going to do a very different job. I think his style will be quite different from his mother's style. And I think that's reasonable. We should expect that incumbents in an office will bring a different flavor to that office. But I think in the end, we will look back at Charles's reign and say he did a good job. It was a much shorter reign than his mother's, just by necessity. But he did what needed to be done. And I think there's a few elements of that we've already started to see. For example, his speech following his mother's passing, where he addressed the Commonwealth, and people could see genuine emotion in him. He was clearly upset and bereaved at this loss. And whereas in the past, perhaps monarchs were a bit more emotionally restrained, Charles has allowed us to see some of his emotions and to share that emotion with him, because he's acknowledging that all of us are feeling shocked and a bit at a loss for this. So there's a little change that's coming, and I don't think that's going to be a bad thing. It may not be permanent. Perhaps William will prefer a more stiff upper lip when he becomes king. You know, we don't know. But at the moment, I think he struck the tone very, very well for the 21st century. And, you know, many of the passions that he's had are very 21st century. You know, his environmentalism and conservation, his concern about cultural preservation and you know, helping youth find their way in the world. Those are issues that he has been involved with for 50 or 60 years, long before the rest of the world picked up on that. I mean, they used to make fun of him for his environmentalism. So I think he's going to be the right person for the times. And then I guess the last point would be the accession ceremony in the UK was televised for the first time in 1,000 years.
Yeah, wow.
And, you know, the Queen had her coronation televised, and that was a big leap forward into the 20th century. You know, it had been in many ways kind of a Victorian institution until she came in and refreshed it. And I think he's going to pull the monarchy into the 21st century.
Wow. And I'm not, I know that most people will have seen this, and I don't mean to be a bit mushy, because I do get annoyed by the font. But this picture with Paddington Bear that most people have seen, and obviously this is not the font that goes with this picture, but I think the actual, whoever's written this has actually summarized a nice feeling. I've done my duties, Paddington. Please take me to my husband. Is a lovely sentiment. I do notice today though in the news, I think Buckingham Palace is telling people to stop putting Paddington Bears outside the place because there's too many of them.
Specifically, they were saying, please don't bring Paddington Bears with marmalade sandwiches.
Right. Fair enough.
They were having a lot of food spoiling on the front of the,
Just lastly, any one particular moment for you of this very short time, it's only the weekend, that stands out for you since you found out?
Well, I mean, the moment that I had sort of confirmed in my own mind that she had indeed passed, and that was at about 6 a.m. on Friday morning. My immediate thoughts were not suitable for broadcast. I was struck by the enormity of this, and I think that will stay with me for the rest of my life. But I think the most iconic images are yet to come. You know, Charles's speech was excellent, and that reassured me a lot that I think he's going to do a great job. There's a photo at the moment of the flag draped coffin being taken into the palace in Scotland, and Princess Anne is there, and she curtsies very, very deeply, and it's I think quite poignant. But I know there are going to be many photos that we're going to see in the coming days that are going to become, well, deeply part of our culture. You know, we'll all be able to say, did you see this photo? And everyone will say, well, yes, of course.
Yeah, look, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us some time today. If people want to find out more about Monarchy New Zealand, it's monarchy.org.nz. You're not heading across yourself?
Oh, no. I have a young son at the moment, and I think my wife would not be at all impressed if I was to leave her with him. And actually, we have a daughter due in another week or two. So, yeah.
Is it Elizabeth? Is that like a done deal for the daughter? I mean, just between me and you?
Just between me and you and everybody listening. Yeah. No names have been settled on yet.
Okay, good.
We'll have to see. But I must admit, there would be something quite poetic about that.
Dr. Sean Palmer from Monarchy New Zealand, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you giving us a few moments.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Mighty. Now, just so you know, because I don't know if you noticed, as soon as the good doctor started talking about a picture of Princess Anne, I was looking at it and I couldn't find it. But the thumbnail, that clip is already on YouTube, and the thumbnail for it looks like this. It's over here as Princess Anne. And actually, Sean and I talked a little bit after that conversation, and he talked about the symbolism of what happens within the royals and even family, you know, people who, because it's a little bit like, you you know, people say I don't respect the president or the prime minister, but I respect the office of the prime minister. So even family members would curtsy to the Queen when they were in the presidents. But he explained that it's just, you know, it's a little like it's a very just I'll do it, but this is what we do, and it's a very small thing. But he actually pointed out that Princess, it's Anne, isn't it? I think so. Here, with such a deep curtsy, is actually quite symbolic in and of itself. You know, like I don't know. I'm not trying to be flippant, but you know, the deeper the curtsy, the more the respect, sort of thing as well. Let's have a look at a few comments. These have been coming in through the whole night, talking about the COVID conversation earlier on. Jay pointed out that 50 Kiwis died of COVID this week. Paul pointed out when I was talking about chin diapers that people who have chin diapers on in the street shouldn't be judged because, you know, you walk out of a store, you take your mask off, you leave it hanging, and you put it back up. I guess that's fair. I was more talking about people who you see in stores with chin diapers on. Like when I was 20s, when I was in my early 20s, and you used to buy cars, and they probably still do it now, but there was a kind of a community of car enthusiasts, and they had stickers all over their back window. It was boy racers basically, and we used to have a bit of a joke that the number of stickers that people had on the back of their cars was there was an inverse law, an equation you could do to the inverse law that would speak to their IQ. So the more stickers on the back window, the lower the IQ. That's sort of how I feel about the chin diaper now, because if you're wearing a chin diaper a week ago, you might be making a statement, I don't really want to wear this mask, but I have to. Now you don't have to. So if you see anyone in a chin diaper now, it is a direct commentary on their IQ, in my opinion. David says, anyone with an anti-vaccine attitude is disinformed, deluded, and likely utterly deranged. Mike, which is Chewy, obviously, was watching, said of Piers Morgan, he is a virus. Of the protest, Rose says, march in defiance and protest the traffic management bill at the same time. Simon says something very interesting. I wonder where the Free Speech Union is right now, what they're doing. For people who don't know, Free Speech Union is a very right-orientated lobby group, and would they get out and speak up on behalf of these kids who are pushing, I guess you'd say, a left-wing perspective? Weaving House says, what's the fee? Let's give the kids the dollars. It's $5,000. And look, I mean, yeah, we had that conversation. I think it's perfectly okay for the kids to march and protest. I would applaud that, but they're also not they're having their voices crashed. I mean, like, to be honest with you, most of these kids have probably got more followers on, Twitter and various social medias than they'll ever have on their march anyway. But they're going to Parliament and they're going to protest at Parliament. No voices are being squashed here. Maybe some walking's being squashed. Maybe some of them need the exercise they should be. Adam says, I'd say, why do we even need this traffic management? If you want to walk down the middle of a busy street, then do it. It's on you if you get hit by a bus. Yep. Talking of a republic, Rose says, yeah, right, a republic is the right way to go. Yeah, right. Do you remember the best that one can give? Trump. And Stephen talking about the republic idea and the issues around the treaty. The Treaty of Waitangi should be a part of our new constitution under a republic. And I think that's right. Now, there's the conversations are still going on about, Christine says, thank you for talking about our Queen tonight. No problems at all. I just want to say something about the chat tonight. There is some commentary in the chat that is there are some people in the chat who are overwhelming the chat at the moment with a number of comments. Now, I'm not necessarily going to hinder this conversation, but what I will say to you is when you become white noise, you get ignored by me. So if you guys are talking to each other backwards and forwards, that's fine. That's great. I actually want that to happen in the chat. I want you to be a community. But if you're also mentioning things that you want to put forward to be brought up on the show, when you put 40 or 50 messages up, I eventually can't read all the texts as it is because it's just me here in the studio. So if you're flooding the texts with dozens and dozens of messages, eventually, for the sake of time, I have to go, well, I've read 15 of this person's text. I'm just going to keep going now. So just a heads up, if you're fine with being ignored by the people on this side of the camera, fine. I will say, though, as well, I am not against having people have a sit down and a bit of time out if they are dominating the conversation. But equally, I'm not about squashing debate between people. If people get, this hasn't happened, but if people get offensive, if people get, I'm happy to block people for that sort of reason, not for being annoying necessarily, but you get basically muted from the show. Because if I've got 100 texts to read there, and I'm exaggerating, but 80 of them are from one or two people, I will typically go to the other ones because the other people are offering different thoughts, not following the same theme. Just letting you know how that's going to work. Anyway, should we go upstairs? Come here. Time to go? I think it's time to go. I think it's time to go. All right, team. Thanks for joining us tonight. I will see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of A Big Hairy News. I think Chewy will be with us tomorrow night, I believe. Be safe through the time period. All stretchy, 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 stretchy. All big stretchy. All that feels good, big stretchy. And we'll catch you tomorrow night from 10. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a good night. Have a good day tomorrow. Be safe. And we'll see you tomorrow night from 10. Hooroo.